Okay, so welcome to Bodhicitta Dakini Monastery. Um, it's that time of year when we'll be spending time with family, or alone with a cask of wine, avoiding family, or meditating if you're a bit more well-adjusted. um, but it's like that time of year when people get triggered and all the stuff we have been pushing down because we have holidays. It's coming up, and so it's a good time of year to talk about handling emotions and staying peaceful. Yeah, you can hear the laundry. Anyway, um, so I think some Buddhists are a bit afraid of anger. They they stigmatize it a lot, and they speak of emotions in terms of negative. Strong emotions. Don't be carried away by the passions. They say stuff like that, but actually, emotions are an important message system for your well-being. They're a mirror of what your state of mind is. So, yeah, sometimes we flee from emotions. Sometimes people they start meditating because they feel overwhelmed by their feelings. And, some people carry pain and they wear a mask for the world, that I'm fine, I'm happy. Or, they're really cynical because they've got a broken heart, basically. And we develop coping mechanisms to cope with or to avoid facing the rawness of life, the messy, painful, inconvenient, needs. Yeah, I mean, some people even can't sleep, or they develop unhealthy coping mechanisms. Yeah. We avoid processing emotions because they are contrary to our self-image and society's ideas of normalcy. If you have this idea of yourself as a really stoic, strong man, it's really hard to admit you're anxious or afraid, and society doesn't support that. That's why some men feel rage, because actually they've been prevented or shamed because of patriarchal socialization of boys, which can be quite brutal. And we don't really do men a favor by, saying like, you're not do it like your toxic masculinity. You've got to feel your feelings, but it's really hard when the way they've been raised is the opposite of that, and they were bullied and shamed for feeling feelings. So it might be better to say, I can see you're in pain, and maybe there's a better way than this stoic mask of masculinity. Because the stoic mask isn't working, we have a really high suicide rate for men. Women have a high suicide rate too, but they choose less lethal means, which means they don't succeed as much as men do in if suicide's a competition, which I hope it isn't. Yeah, so a supportive society is one in which the difficulties of being human are warmly recognized and charitably accepted. And now it's like with everything being online, it's almost like our time is really precious and we're really distracted. So we actually aren't as charitable in terms of tolerating odd people. Hi, there's that guy I see at the supermarket, and we just stop and say, how are you? And have a bit of a chat. And then he goes back to pushing his trolley to the park, and talking to the air. Like now, because we're very choosy about who we spend our time with, and we live in echo chambers online where we think we see ourselves validated back to us. So we're less tolerant of difference and different opinions, and we don't know how to have a conversation with nuance about okay, well, our experiences, our lives have been different, so it's unlikely we're going to agree on everything. But how can we work together for the greater good? So people that are maladapted or have, um, you know, special needs or some social anxiety or some social, how you say, hindrances, fall between the cracks and become even more lonely. And that's why you see some even more extreme maladapted behavior. Um, yeah, so, and also from the time we're very young, we're looking outward. As a child, even the television show is like all about bringing them outward. We're not sitting in ourselves. We don't know how to sit with our feelings. We don't know how to look inside, and even just to feel our feelings, to feel uncomfortable, to feel bored. To have space and make friends with our heart and be content. Right? Where capitalism is based on creating a need, a lack, and bringing people outwards. So even our socialization, let's go to the mall, let's go to a coffee shop, let's travel, where we've created all of these systems that are not natural, and that are based on the exchange of money. Like, when was the last time you just went to maybe in Tasmania we have many ways, like we have a lot of national parks and farms and space, but I remember in Sydney, like, it's really hard to have a social interaction that doesn't involve some form of capital exchange, which is kind of a shame. But we do need to sit still and be with ourselves, even if that means facing boredom and uncertainty and anxiety. And we find out we're not who we thought we were. We're neither as good nor as bad, usually, as we thought we were. Like, when I first went on a meditation retreat, I just had this vision of myself coming back as this really holy, wise, sorted out all my shit person, and people always put that on you as a nun. Like, what do you mean you drink coffee? What do you mean that sometimes you secretly want to smoke a cigarette, or that you swear, or, that you're not perfect, that you're not wise, you don't have your shit together, don't you have, like, you've been a nun 25 years, come on, it's like all that pressure, Actually, like, you don't become a nun to create a religious ego or identity. You become a nun to lose the baggage. So if you're just a simple, kind, spacious person who is very human and you don't hurt anyone, I think that's okay. If you're someone who has made a really sophisticated spiritual ego that's really shiny, beware the teachers that are shiny and attractive, like the ones that are like kind and a little bit boring, they're probably better, less likely to end up in a cult, that's my excuse and I'm sticking to it. So meditation is it's like a safe space where a containment where um, we're observing our mind and our defenses are put aside, and the artifice is put aside, so the power of raw emotions can be overwhelming, especially when it's something like grief or childhood trauma. Life is, bumpy. So, and when we learn to process our feelings and our thoughts without neither acting out or suppressing, then we do things that we don't, we learn to move through feelings, and we realize feelings don't last forever. Like, when I was young, my father died and I wanted to kill myself, and I just couldn't understand that my thoughts and feelings don't last, and you could take a permanent decision based on a temporary feeling. And I'm very glad I didn't, but I didn't know that then. I just knew I'm in pain and I wish I was dead. And there's no light in the world. There's nobody's talking about this. Nobody's living with an open heart, talking about what is the meaning of life. If we're going to die, what does life mean? You know? Yeah, so it's really important to allow yourself to feel and soften to life and open to what is going on, even if it's a bit uncomfortable sometimes. But that doesn't mean we don't have boundaries, or that that we become caught in our feelings, to the point where we're really reactive. We learn to, it's more like, riding a wave and seeing the end, seeing the beginning, but also seeing the end. That's freedom, when you can see something and allow it to wash over you, but you're not dragged out to sea in a rip. In Australia, we have these big waves, and the undertow can pull you out and drown you. And they say the way to deal with a rip is to just swim sideways and float. Don't fight against it, right? So a big feeling, same thing. Sometimes you might need a therapist, and that's okay too, But you don't want to get dragged out to sea either. So you learn to identify, here, there be dragons. So just because we feel something doesn't mean we'll feel it tomorrow. And just because we feel it doesn't mean we should act on it. Like, hey, I'm married, but she's really hot. But no, I'm married. You know what I mean? Or like, hey, he's an idiot and I really want to punch him, but, he's my brother. So maybe not. Yeah, so, and just because you're like mad at your friend or your partner doesn't mean they're wrong. Sometimes we find it hard to tolerate suffering or a feeling or irritation. So we get angry, we get overwhelmed. So it's good to try and avoid your triggers, get enough sleep, get enough exercise, don't do too many things at once. Because often the people that will get our fire are the ones we love the most, our children and our partner. And that's really unfair to them, if we're constantly irritated and we're tired and we're not managing well, they're going to get the overflow of that. So self-care is actually community care. Yeah. Yeah, and when we get overwhelmed, we go into flight or fight, So it's good to kind of become familiar with processing your feelings and being regulated, staying calm. Even with children, like when a child will learn to regulate from their parent. So if the parent isn't regulated, the child won't be regulated. And, when something bad happens and you're like, oh my God, that's not teaching the kid how to react to that. I had a mother who was in flight or fight a lot. So that was very hard to learn. And I still don't always, in a crisis, I might overreact or scream or like just as I can't even control it. It's an unconscious response, So it's taken me many years to try and relax and stay spacious, and I don't always succeed. So what is the pain underneath the anger? What is the feeling underneath? Like we need to talk to ourselves like a well-educated, psychologically educated parent would talk to a child, like, wow, you're having some big feelings right now. Yeah. So what's the feeling there? What are you feeling? What do you need? Yeah. And just like I've seen a video where the therapist just says to the child, so wow, that's a big feeling you're having. And the child's like, yeah, it's a big feeling. And they're like, do you need to sit down? Do you need to breathe? or do you want to just have some time out and then go back to playing? And the kid goes, I need some time out, and then they just go for a little walk, like, and the adult doesn't say, you're okay, which kind of says to the child, okay, I need to hide this feeling because it's not acceptable. I won't get love if I show this feeling. What the adult is showing the child is it's okay to have this feeling, and there's nothing, you don't need to suppress it, and you don't need to punch someone. You can just have it. You're human. Right? Yeah. So yeah, so don't act immediately if you're having some big feelings, Um, take time. Take time. Being afraid and wanting to run is in survival mode, so like we've also got like temperament and genetic and conditioning and unprocessed anger and anxiety or depression, because of how we were taught to process emotions as a child. And we have unhealthy ways of processing those unresolved feelings or trauma, which I spoke about before, but like, ways to numb ourselves, drink too much, binge eating, busyness, workaholism, um, you know, constantly seeking reassurance from others, self-harm. But what does it mean to face disturbing emotions? It's good to acknowledge, to accept, to sit with it, and to let it pass on its own, which is it's not always easy, but possible. So people think that monks or nuns are like running away from society and, not economically productive, you know. But actually, if a lot of people could just sit with their feelings, like we wouldn't have people like Trump and Putin and, those kind of megalomaniac dictators who like to drop bombs on people, you know. Yeah, and we're not bad for having emotions. We're not bad for having stupid thoughts, you know. But when we realize that they're just energy, they become liberated in their own state. And also, sometimes people disassociate. The feeling at the time is too dangerous to process. And there's a real problem in spiritual communities of people who look peaceful who are in fact disassociated, not feeling what they feel. So, how does this feeling, this numbness feel in my body? What do I feel? What do I smell? What do I taste? How fast is my heart beating? And how do we pay attention to the emotion, how it affects us? The emotion may be real, but the logic of it may not be. So that's another new age tendency of like, well, I feel it, so it must be real. It's my lived experience, and this all not recognizing that we all project reality onto each other. So don't assume that you know what the other person is thinking, or just because you feel challenged doesn't mean the other person is immediately your enemy or a phobe of some kind, a bigot. Just because someone asks you a question about your identity doesn't mean they necessarily don't accept your identity as well. Like there's a lot of that reactionary stuff going on in political circles and, activist circles of like, how dare you question my identity? First, don't assume. They might just be curious. They might not just have heard of it. They might not understand. And there's a difference between hate and ignorance, you know. Yeah, so breathing and coming back to the breath. Emotions and thoughts begin to become, there's more space between them. And like sometimes we when we get in a trauma, when we get something that's deeply, it's like the mind is wood and our life is a carving on the wood, and we have samskaras, mental patterns that we carve into the wood. But the beautiful thing about wood is you can always carve a new pattern. But with the mind, we create mental pathways. Like, as someone with ADHD, I'm always searching for dopamine. So I like shopping because my grandmother was a shopaholic. So I get a big hit of dopamine when I buy something. So the way I try to deal with that is op shops, because that's affordable for a nun. Or like, a junk shop or something. But yeah, I have to also try and create new mental pathways. Like, wouldn't it be better to go for a bushwalk, or do you really need another whatever? Meaningful social interactions. Like, you've got to find things that water seeds of happiness in you and connection and well-being, and a way to be the gardener that tends your heart, right? To water the seeds of something that is wholesome, that, to, like the Buddha said, in caring for the mind, water the wholesome that has not yet arisen, let go of the unwholesome that has arisen. It's like tending the garden. You pull out the plants that aren't beneficial. You can see if a little thistle, or in Tassie we have these things that we call fuzzy wuzzies, and they stick to everything. Like, if you get them in your dog's hair, it's terrible. And so, when you see one of those popping up, okay, you're coming out, because you'll be like all over the garden, by summer's end. So, there's that thought, there's that desire, just one drink, or like you feed things that feed your rage. Social media purposely manipulates people. It has their psychological patterns, their private information, their deepest fears, the things they Google deep into the night when no one else is looking, and it takes those things and manipulates them to enrage people, to trigger people, to make you buy things, or make you hate yourself. Like, I remember being a little girl with a little pot belly, like just a little pot belly, tiny, like a little pot belly that children have, And I looked at myself in the mirror and I just thought, I don't look like Elle Macpherson. Like, so I remember sucking in my tummy at like 8, and kind of already having those images of being inundated with those images of, what a woman is supposed to look like, kind of. It started that young, Anyway, yeah, so with the mental pathways, we want to create new, because some people, like, they can't get up and meditate. They find it hard to create that pattern, but it's just a matter of, like, if you do it long enough, it'll happen on its own. If like, I remember setting an alarm, and eventually, like, I would just wake up at that time because that was my routine, right? So you just create meditation in your routine, or you create, maybe it's really hard for you to be generous, so you offer the water bowls to the Buddha, or you just offer at Christmas time to a charity, or you just go, in the festive season, and go to a food, how you say, like a soup kitchen, and you see directly the beauty of what it's like to give something, and then you understand, wow, okay, actually being good, doing good things, I feel good, I feel connected, I don't feel so cynical about humanity, So you do things to water seeds of wisdom and compassion, and you make that part of your routine, and over time you change, carving new things. But we tend to get caught in our old storylines. Some people are in a loop. I know one lady, she lost her children, she had them taken away, and she's on a loop of pain, So we've got to interrupt some of those patterns with new things, something good, something new to move into, to heal, to not keep holding on to the past. Yeah. Because every moment is new. This life is precious and we just don't know when we'll die. So life is too short to hold on to a pain and make that your identity, you know. And use the information your emotions give you. So emotions are just like the messengers of the heart. Don't kill the messenger. And it can be irritating to have your heart tell you, I really need this. I'm really upset about this. And you're like, come on, I'm trying to be this great meditator. You're being really petty. Shut up. But actually, you know, sometimes those emotions can lead us to magical places and humbling, profound, moving, inspiring breakthroughs that we didn't expect. All the experiences and appearances of the world are like a wave that never breaks. And the Tibetan Buddhist teachings say the mind is pure from the very beginning. Thoughts, feelings, sensations, self-identity, the flow of consciousness. The self is not as solid as it appears, but we take this information and we filter it. And based on this information, you know, this sensory input, these thoughts, these life experiences, we've created this person. It's kind of like a scriptwriter, actually, like method acting. This is your character. This is what you've been through. This is your goal. This is your personality. This is your agenda. And this is how you play in with that person. You know. But it is really interesting when you sit in meditation and close your eyes. Where is this? Like, you just realize a lot of who we think we are and what we play is literally a script. Not to say that we don't have a relative self with thoughts and feelings, you know, and that those thoughts and feelings don't matter or have consequences. They do. But ultimately, being a little bit aware that the self is a combination of mind and body that isn't permanent can be freeing. But it's really a bad idea to dismiss other people's needs and experiences. The point of knowing selflessness, when we say selflessness, we don't mean nihilism, black space, no you. What we mean is that your self has a relative existence, but it is a conditioned, impermanent construct that is constantly changing. And holding onto it too tight creates suffering. So being aware that it is a relative, impermanent interbeing can be freeing. So emptiness means fullness. Because you don't have a permanent, unchanging self, you are full of all of heaven and earth. Like I said, the non-you elements, the earth, the farmer, your mother and father and ancestors, cultural conditioning, gender conditioning, genetic inheritance. All of these things are in a constant flow and interaction, you know. So based on these impermanent things, we construct a self-identity like a house on sand. But it's kind of hard to hold it because it's constantly changing, like a millionaire's house by the sea in Byron Bay. The climate change is coming in and the sand is flowing out and the cracks are appearing in the walls. So usually, we at the end of the day, we feel really tired, and we're not just physically exhausted. We're exhausted from thinking and feeling and interacting. And if you're on the spectrum, you're probably even more exhausted because you're trying to guess what other people think and feel. Like, especially if you're a woman who is neurodivergent, you're trying even harder to mask and fit in. You know, what do you need? What are you feeling? What do you need from me? How can I pretend to be normal in this situation? So yeah. But the basis of awareness is pure open space. So we get a bit excited and we create a lot of activity. But sometimes where we've created like a hoarder's house and a really complex system. Like life in Western countries is exhausting because of all the rules and the red tape, and it's just so ridiculous. Like when you think about the fact that we'll die and we've created all these rules and you think that's reality, and then like you have a storm that sweeps away all the houses and you've got all these people like, where can I plug in my phone? You know, like, how did this happen? You know, and it's like, it's always been uncertain, but you have been conditioned to think that this is reality, you know. But reality is, that's why getting out in nature and not losing touch with nature is a really good idea, you know, because you realize things are not as certain as they appear, and it's moment to moment. Of course, it's nice to have a routine. Like children need a routine. They need to know where they're going to eat and sleep and all of that. But as adults, we can loosen up a little bit and realize, let change in, because a world where everything is predictable and we don't see impermanence is a bit suffocating, a bit stifling, a bit dull. Yeah. And unfortunately, in this space, you know, we've created karmic pathways, we've created self-grasping, and our self-clinging deceives us. It creates continuity out of sensory input. You know, like when you see a rope hanging from a tree in the evening and you think it's a snake, but actually it's just a rope hanging from a tree. So our whole existence is like that. We've based on this rope hanging on a tree, this rope being our 5 skandhas, our form, feeling, sensory input, form, feeling, other factors, mental form, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness. So like an onion, our mind-body continuum, our sensations, our sensory input and consciousness and thoughts and feelings, over these things we wrap our self-identity, and we've created on a rope, we've created a snake. You know, like if I realized that I am impermanent, I am almost like a dream, you know, if I had that sense of wonder that things aren't quite as solid and that I'm in a constant state of change, I think life is more fresh when you view things like that, like, and not necessarily jump like, I know you, I know what you think. Even the one we're with, you know, being with another person is a constant miracle, and they're constantly changing, you know, and it's really sad to look over one day and realize like you haven't really been seeing them because you just had this idea in your head of who you thought they were, and then their needs aren't met. It's better to encounter them every moment and be like, what do you think? What do you feel? What do you need? What do I think? What do I feel? What do I need? Yeah, because based on self and other, based on this temporary input, we create a whole self-clinging world of aversion, attachment, and indifference. And it always deceives us. Yeah. We perceive the outer world. I know what this is, you know, but the world is vast and we've lost our sense of wonder. Like a little child is happy with just a cookie and a swing, you know, but as we get older, we need bigger cookies and bigger swings. I don't just need a cookie now. I need a car, and I need a house, and I need a partner, you know. I need reality, real estate. You know, it's so funny, when I so-called bought this property, I just realized no one can own. It's like a million-year-old sacred being. I'm just its custodian. How could I possibly own this thing that's been here for millions of years? It's a joke. It's like an ant sitting on top of I don't know, Mount Everest going, oh yeah, look, it's nice. And Mount Everest just goes, you know. Yeah. So thoughts and feelings arise and pass. No one causes them, but they arise in our arena. So we think that they're ours. Oh, I better do something about these people, these shuffling beings. I better interact with them. I better feed them. Just give them a cup of tea and let them go home. Don't keep asking them to stay longer. They're going to trash your house. They always trash your house. Just give them a cup of tea and let them go. Let them be on their way. Like Shunryu Suzuki, the Zen master, he just said, front door and back door open, give them a cup of tea and let them move on. Guests. Yeah. But really, the sky-like nature of mind is pure illumination. This moment, this moment, this moment. When we think these passing phenomena are me, then duality is born, right? So even our feelings, you might think, wow, where she's going now is kind of a contradiction to what she just spoke about with emotions and taking care of emotions and validating emotions. But emotions just are like the wave, they arise, they abide, they dissolve. The nature of the wave is the water. It's the play of the mind. Doesn't mean it doesn't matter, doesn't mean we should disassociate or dismiss, but it means it's transparent and we take it lightly. We take it with joy. We don't make it concrete. We don't carry it around with us. Like there was this master called Ajahn Chah, and one day they were trying to move a big rock, and I'm just paraphrasing because I can't remember the story exactly, but he said to his student, the student was like, I'm really suffering being a monk. I'm not as happy as I thought I'd be. I think I might disrobe. And they were building and they had to move this rock. And Ajahn Chah was like, yeah, that's fine, whatever. Can you just move this rock? And so the monk lifted this really big rock. And then he put it down, and Ajahn Chah said, see, you feel relieved, don't you? You put it down, you put down the burden. And the monk was like, yeah. And Ajahn Chah was like, that rock is all your self-identity and your suffering and your thoughts and feelings. If you just let it sit on the ground, it's not a problem. But if you keep lifting it up and carrying it around and making it you making, that's where the suffering comes, right? So let the thoughts and feelings be there, but don't be constantly carrying it around. When we carry it around, that's when it becomes a problem, not only for us, but for other people. You see some people, they come in and they're like, this is me. I'm a born again Christian. I'm a Buddhist nun. And so you have to deal with that rock they're carrying around, that identity, And this happened to me. And that's why people in communities can make each other suffer, because of their rocks beating against each other. And the bigger the sense of self, the harder it is to move in harmony and move intuitively in the moment what needs to be done. A wise person will just see in the moment what needs to be done. The Buddha didn't make rules before unenlightened beings started becoming monks and nuns, but then unenlightened beings started becoming monks and nuns and doing weird stuff. So he's like, yeah, please don't have sex with your ex-wife. And no, don't have sex with corpses. Weird stuff. Before that, like, people could get on very well and they could just see, like, okay, it's time for lunch. Okay, you chop the onions and I'll go and collect the carrots, and it's no issue because you can see and you're open and you're in the moment. But people who are carrying big rocks, okay, need to make rules. So allow what comes to come. Don't suffer unnecessarily. Be kind. Water seeds of virtue. But don't carry the rock, and even worse, don't use the rock to beat other people. or combat them. Yeah. The this shimmering world is our projection, you know? So it's not always question yourself, not necessarily so. Um, what we attach to, what we avoid, our selective attention seems to create these highs and lows, but really we're just fixating on one aspect. Because even if we're having a shit day, the birds are still singing, you know? I just remember when I got diagnosed with lymphoma, and I would see people bitching on Facebook, like, you know, traffic or whatever, and I'd be like, wow, you know, the sky is so blue today. I just want to be alive another day so I can bitch about the traffic. Like, I would be like, people would be bitching and I'd be like, you're alive. Do you know how lucky you are? You're alive, you know? Kind of, you have good health today. You have a loved one with you today, you know? It's good to cultivate a more wide panoramic vision, because we don't often see things as we are. We see them as we are. We live in an echo chamber. Our thoughts are returned to us as valid, and we weave a web of who we are. And people are like, well, if I don't just follow every thought, maybe I'll be irrelevant. Like the fame thing. No one will know me. If I don't make a post on Facebook, will I exist? If the tree falls and no one sees it, where does it fall? But to be irrelevant could be JOMO, the joy of missing out. Where will I go? You know, but the more you observe and you're not reactive, the more you're truly at home in the world, but you're at home in the homeless home. And the impact of good or bad has less drama, less hope and fear, more space. And when you're holding space for others, you can really get involved in their pain, you know. So if you are a social worker, or you know, you have to deal with people a lot, it's really important to have this spaciousness, even if you have kids. Yeah. Who is walking? Who is pissed off? The mind is a mirror. It shows a pattern. But really, everything is as it is, just like the old-fashioned projector, you know, the light and the colors dancing on the screen. The projectionist knows this is just light over film. It may be a comedy, it may be a tragedy, it may be a drama, maybe a horror, but it's just light dancing on screen. But of course, that is the ultimate view of Buddhism, and that is not an easy thing to cultivate. So you still have to have compassion, because if you're in a horror, you know, you've got to have empathy for people in the horror. But still, it's good to know that, to have a bit more spaciousness around the inevitable ups and downs of life, right? So when I say this is like a dream, or your self is not as solid as it appears, I'm not saying, you know, I wouldn't say to you, oh, your husband just died, well, you don't exist, so that's fine. What we're trying to do here is, with nuance, is to say death comes to us all, and it's a mystery. And maybe they're the wind in the trees, maybe they're the full moon rising over the mountain, maybe they continue in you. So have some spaciousness and understand they've just gone into another room, but they're still part of you. And don't hold on so tightly, because the miracle of interbeing, the present moment awareness, is more joyous when you don't fixate, when you don't carry around the rock, when you remain spacious, relax in awareness. Enjoy the display, this ceaseless unfolding, cause and effect. Hanging on is the problem. You know, when you're brooding, you're not present. So the conduct, the view in the Nyingma school of Tibetan Buddhism, we say view, meditation, conduct. So the view is that you are not as solid as you appear. You have the mind of an awakened being since beginningless time. The meditation is to integrate this view in daily life. And the conduct is to be spacious and remain open and try not to fixate. And it's so easy to say and hard to do. Yeah, but this openness, this clarity, moment by moment unfolding, however it is, that is the open ground. The idea of self-improvement is a fallacy. But we're just sweeping away the dust of awareness. From awareness, I should say. Awareness isn't dust. Yeah, so our eyes can only see light and color. The mind interprets those shapes. The ears interpret those sounds. Conduct, view, meditation, action. So the action is to allow things to unfold and be open to the fresh moment and to respond with compassion. And meditation, or the path, is to stay close to the luminous, pure ground of our Buddha nature. Yeah, do things, open, fresh participation, but without clinging too tightly. And this view is very hard to maintain. So it is very good to do retreat and to have a daily practice and to come to a community where people are striving to be, not holding on too tightly. Yeah. Whatever comes goes. Awareness has two qualities. One is spaciousness, the fact that you can't hold on too tight. The other is clarity, that you remember things, you can cognize, you have reflections. Different things have different flavors. But still, it's like the bird's flight across the sky. Even though my Vegemite toast was salty, and I knew at the time this is salty, it's gone already. It's become part of my body now. It's transforming. It's on its way in the great cosmic journey. Yeah. So I'll just finish with oh, it's already 50 minutes. This is a story from the Theravada tradition. It's called the Bahia Sutta. And there was a monk called Bahia, and he wasn't a monk, he was a ascetic from another tradition, not Buddhism. And he one day saw the Buddha when he was on alms round collecting food, and he's like, Buddha, I could die at any time. You need to tell me the essence of your teachings right now, please. And the Buddha's like, Bahia, I'm collecting lunch, just chill out and come back after lunch. And then Bahia's like, but I could die before then. So just tell me the essence of your teaching. And the Buddha's like, all right. In the seen, there is just the seen. In the heard, there is just the heard. In the thought, the cognized, there is just the cognized. And what he means is, in reference to what is heard, don't create a self. There is no you in connection to that. It just is. And because this self is only a relative thing, this is me explaining, not what the Buddha said. It is just moment to moment. And because there is, when you realize the self is impermanent, there is no more clinging and suffering. And Bahia got it. And he stopped clinging. And then he went away and he was like, wow. And then a cow gored him, a bull, and he died. And the monks came to the Buddha that day and he's like, Bahia died. And just before he met you, oh enlightened one. And it's so sad because he wanted to become a monk and pursue the path to liberation. And the Buddha was like, it's okay, he got it. So um, and that's why someone like in the Zen tradition, we say in our prayers, we say the one who bows and the one who is bowed to are both by nature empty. Empty fullness, meaning interbeing. Uh, and therefore the communication between them is infinitely perfect. Yeah. So some of what I said today may be hard to understand. Just let it wash over you and take what is useful and remain open to what may be useful in the future. Yeah.